Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So whether you have a book on your computer, a manuscript all ready to go, whether it's still in your head, or maybe even 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer. And yes, at least once a month, I get an envelope filled with loose leaf. Visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by three authors who have completely unleashed themselves. Debbie D. Louise is the writer of Barking Up the Wrong Tree, Cobble Cove Story number 5, which of course means that there are at least 4 more that came before that, and also recently released Meows and Purrs, a collection of cat poems. R.K. Mullins, the author of A Sniper's Kiss, Hate Takes a Bullet, and it is the 3rd in his serial killer series. And author Lâle Davidson is the author of Blue Woman Burning, a new novel, as well as a book of short stories, the award-winning Strange Appetites. So I'm so thrilled to have our 3 authors today. Please welcome Debbie D. Louise, the author of Barking Up the Wrong Tree and Meows and Purrs. And I'm personally hoping we're joined by a meower today. Hi, Debbie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's great to be here.
Always great to have you. And if somebody walks by that computer, please know I'm cheering them on. They do that to me all day long, too. Their favorite place is the computer keyboard.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
They are the ultimate inspiration. So tell us a little bit about you, and my favorite thing about you, that your cat awards, the many.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm a member of the Cat Writers Association, and I did win their Muse medallion. I didn't bring it today, but
see, I'm surprised you don't wear it all the time.
I should have. I have it. No, I have it on the wall. I have it in a frame.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I don't wear it, but I was honored to receive that. I've also won a silver medal award for one of my standalone mysteries. Yeah, and my 2 new books, which you mentioned, the Barking Up the Wrong Tree is part of my Cobble Cove series, but I have 5 full-length books that are in print form and also in ebook form, but the 5 stories are just in ebook form. So they have the same characters, and they just have different mysteries, and they're cozy mysteries. So they're just a lot of fun to read.
How many books are you up to? I mean, you're a full-time librarian on top of all this.
Oh, yes. I should have mentioned that. Yes, I'm a librarian at a public library, reference librarian. Yeah, I think I'm losing count, about 12 books now. And stories and in anthologies such as the Red Penguin collection, I have at least a dozen, at least, if not more.
So all those people who are talking writer's block and being too busy, they don't know what they're talking about. A dozen books. So tell us a little bit about the Cobble Cove series.
All right. Well, this series started in 2015, and as I said, there's 5 books in the series. It started with A Stone's Throw, which is the first book, which introduces Alicia, who's a librarian. And so I know a lot. Because of course I'm a librarian, so it was very easy to create a character who would be the main character of the series. And a newspaper publisher. In the first book, Alicia, her husband has been killed in a hit and run accident, and it's mysterious. And she wants to know more about what happened, but she wants to travel to his hometown, she comes from Long Island, and she travels upstate, and it's a fictional town, Cobble Cove. It has some quirky residents, small town, and she meets some people there that knew John, that knew Peter, husband Peter, and she meets John, who's the newspaper publisher. And the story goes on from there because she ends up accepting a job there. And so she's going to stay in Cobble Cove. And then there's a mystery that unravels, and it's connected to her husband. There's family secrets. And she finds out what really happened to her husband. And she has a romance. And also she meets Sneaky the library cat, Sneaky the Siamese, and he becomes a main character later in the book. Well, in all the books, he leads her to the clues. But in the first book, we also have Fido, who is now in story 5, the barking up the wrong tree. Fido has kind of taken second place to Sneaky because Sneaky has really run the series after the first book, because Fido played a big role in the first book of the series. Then he was in the other books, but Sneaky, as cats do, he took center stage. And then we introduced the female cat, Kitty Kai, later in the series. And we even had 3 cats in the book before the 5th book of the series, the last one I wrote, the No Gravestone Unturned. And that one is now shortlisted for the Chanticleer Mystery and Mayhem Awards. So I'm very excited about that. But this new book, this story, it's not, as I said, it is a book, but it's only in ebook form. Barking Up the Wrong Tree. Fido has a role, but all the cats are in it. I didn't leave the cats out. I have all the pets. In fact, there's also a female dog, the Beagle, a Ruby. So we have 2 dogs and we have 2 cats in this book. So I try to, I like to put pets in my books, even my standalone mysteries. Not all of them are cozy, but they usually have a cat or a dog in them, or both. Or I even have a parrot in one of my books. And then I decided to write the poetry collection based on my own cats. And I just have a poem about every single cat I've had. And I've had a lot, believe me. I've had them since I was a child. So
I know. I have the poetry collection right here too, and I love it.
Yeah.
Will you be able to read some poems for us?
I would be happy to read some. Do you want me to read them now?
Sure.
I don't want to take up too much time.
No. I would love to. Which one are you going to pick?
Well, I have 2 that I'd like to share. The one, My Mother's Cats, which is the first poem in the book, I'd like to share because, my mother passed away 3 years ago. And the story is that she had a cat, Oliver, at that time that we took in. And he was an older cat. He was a senior cat. And then he passed away 9 months after. She passed away 9 months after he did, and she had dementia. So we didn't even tell her because they were very close. But he became very close to us. But after they both passed away, we adopted our kittens, Harry and Hermione, who are now 3 years old. But my mother was that's how I started that's how I really became a pet lover with my family. We grew up with dogs and cats. And I did write this, I dedicated this to my mother also because of, her love of cats and what it taught me. So I'll read it. My Mother's Cats. My earliest memories were of my mother's cats, the lost and the strays, those she fed outside, those she kept, those she gave away. There were always cats in our house, it seems. Tabbies, short hairs, Siamese. We had litters of kittens, a few older cats, some were thin, others fat. A few lived with us long, a few very short. They were each special, I thought. My mother's cats were my friends, a young child, almost an only. They kept me company. My mother's cats knew when I was sad or sick. They comforted me with purrs and licks. My mother taught me how to care for them, the special bond of a furry friend.
Oh.
We cried together when they died, buried them in our backyard. My love of cats was born in childhood, raised over years by a woman so good. Now that she's gone, I know what she left me, a heart full of love for all felines, along with the memories. Oh. And there's a picture of my mother. I dedicated the poem to her. In each of the poems in the book, I have pictures either of the cats or whoever the poem was about, and a little author's notes about what inspired me to write the poems.
Oh,
So,
beautiful.
I have a funny poem. That's a little sad. I have a funny poem. I also have poems about Rainbow Bridge, but I have each individual. I have My Mini Panther, which is based on Harry. I know a Calico based on Hermione. So they're all based on my cats, but this one is based on cats in general. It's called Acrobats and Clowns. Anyone who's lived with cats knows what they're about. They climb and jump like acrobats. They make you smile when you're down. Funny, furry, feline clowns. The things they do, you question why. They can soar through the air in pursuit of a fly. They can squeeze into the smallest places and make the funniest faces. When something catches their eye, their whiskers twitch and strange sounds they emit. They're daredevils and yoga masters, thieves and actors, but most of their renown are as acrobats and clowns.
Love that. Love that. Do the rest of us, are we all pet people on this call today? Lâle, what about you? What do you have?
I have 2 cats. I did have a dog who died of old age this summer.
Oh.
And yeah, but she had a good life, and and I actually wrote a little book for my daughter featuring my cats. A little when my daughter was maybe 2 or something. I wrote a cat, that story about, because she so wanted to hug them and play with them, and they really didn't like that. And so the whole book was sort of about, basically how it is that you charm a cat. You can't chase them, you can't follow them, you got to let them go.
Right. Oh,
Yeah, you have to play hard to get, because they only like the people who aren't interested in them.
That's very, very true. That is very,
like
very
most women.
Yeah.
I heard that.
No, I didn't say a word.
Nope, I didn't hear anything.
You better be careful. You're on a call with 3 women here.
Hey, listen, man, I'm used when I'm on this thing, I'm used to getting outnumbered.
You have any pets down there?
No, actually I don't, but I grew up on a 200-acre farm. I had horses, cows, pigs, chickens, dogs, cats, squirrels,
Wow.
groundhogs, and a few coons.
Oh,
Wow.
but nothing right now, huh?
Not
You're
right now.
you're paring down.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yes, well, I have 2 cats, although one of my cats is big enough to say
Oh,
that
yeah, I met her.
so it's more like I have 4 cats, because one of them
You're a little Clover.
I left all my pets in other states, called my ex-wives.
Oh, you have pets with ex-wives. Now we know.
So they were my pets.
Oh,
Now they're my
Right.
ex-wives.
Right. I thought maybe the cats were your ex-wives.
No,
and,
they would be nicer to keep.
and I have a very, very old dog who we absolutely adore. She just
Yeah.
passed her 15th birthday.
Oh
Wow.
Lord.
And she spends her days sleeping in my office. She's awake for about 10 minutes a day.
Smaller than the cats. Yeah.
That's how mine was. Yeah. I actually had a 3rd cat, and she's quite a character. She is she's like a Manx or something. I don't want, I only take rescue cats. So she has a little tiny stubby tail, and the whole neighborhood knows her. She's very outgoing. But she really hated my first 2 cats. So we had a little studio, and my husband, whenever he was sitting in it, she would go into there, and she felt really good because that was her house. And then they would get very cozy together, and I would walk in, and she would sort of jump off his lap as if like we weren't doing anything. So I began to joke, like, you're cheating on me, aren't you? Like, you have a cat wife now. But she has left him for a younger man. She decided she hated our cat so much that she went around the neighborhood and plucked on all the windows until somebody decided to let her in, this young man, and she's moved in with him. She still comes back and visits us, and I don't think she understands that we've given her to this other person. She's it's all her territory as far as she's concerned.
It's funny that you say that about choosing your husband, because my Clover absolutely has chosen my husband over me. adores my husband. I'm convinced that she just kind of sits there looking at me thinking, how can I get rid of her?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I feed her, I clean the litter box, but it's my husband she loves. Yeah.
That's me. I do all the things. And yet if I go away, she sleeps on my side of the bed, sprawls out. Not happy.
Yep,
Yeah, that's what Hermione does. She
your
sleeps
husband
in
has
my
2
bedroom,
wives.
not-
Does. And one of them is really quite chubby. One of them is really, really quite chubby. Well, so certainly if you like mystery, if you like romance, if you like poetry, and if you like any animals, I was about to say cats, but I hear there's a lot of dogs in here too. Lots of dogs in the Cobble Cove series. So you'll definitely want to check that out. Now we're going to go from nice, sunny, lovely stories to a sniper's kiss.
Oh.
Take that bullet.
Oh, boy.
This is the third in the series by Keith Mullins of the serial killer series. He's such a nice person. You know, he knows he's sitting there laughing. He's one of my favorite people in the world. And yet he writes this stuff that I could barely read it because I'm going to have nightmares. But welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, Stephanie. Thank you. And you're absolutely one of my favorite people. I can guarantee you
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thank you.
No.
And, you know, every time you say to me, did you read the book? I say, I was too scared. I can only go so
She
far.
claims to be a weenie. I don't think she really is. I don't think she likes my
No.
writing.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just the depiction.
You have to tell me because you know, how can someone so nice, and by the way, not only so nice, he cooks up a storm. Oh my gosh. And yet you're writing these slasher dasher 500 ways to torture someone so they wish you'd just shoot them kind of books.
She did read Confessions Before Death.
I did read Confessions Before Death. Yes, I did. And you managed to find 500 ways to. There was one in Confessions Before Death that somebody was being tortured for like 24 hours. There was like a timer.
Oh, my God.
No,
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, I did read that. I didn't sleep for a week after I
I
read
can't do that.
Well, you know, I don't want to cause you any distress, not let you get any sleep, but I started writing about serial killers because originally I couldn't find any books on how they thought. And I was more interested on the thinking process, not what they did. So I decided to invent one. And by inventing one, I could discover how they think because I would have to be the one doing the thinking for them. So Time for a Serial Killer, Lifetime of Murder was created. And then, you know, Confessions Before Death, the second one. All of them have one thing in common. All of them must connect to the very first book. Some way, somehow. They have to connect to the book prior to them in some form or fashion. It can be even very slight. They might not even notice it. But they can all be read as a standalone. They all have to have 3 major twists. They all must have an unpredictable ending. And thus far, I have not disappointed. My latest one, also I put stuff in there about that I find distasteful. In Time for a Serial Killer, I hate male chauvinist pigs. I can't stand them. I've got 2 daughters of my own. I don't want them treated that way. So one of the main protagonists in there, he's a chauvinist pig. I get put in his place several times. Confessions Before Death.
Rudeness. You're against rudeness.
Rude. I can't stand rudeness.
Yeah.
It's appalling to me. There's no excuse for it. And A Sniper's Kiss, Hate Takes a Bullet. I can't stand racism in any form or fashion. So it is evident in that book because most of the people that get killed are from racist groups. Also, I mean, I've got 4 books out right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got 4 books out. those three, which are part of the serial killer series, which is supposed to be 10 books, it's going to be a 10-book series. When I finish, if I do have any fans of the series, they are not going to like me. But, the fourth one is actually a short story memoir that I did called The Drunken Savior. Actually, it is in the Red Penguin anthology.
Yes, it is.
And which I'm very proud that that's the very first publication that it saw. And it's a true story about a small portion of my life and a man that I credit for saving my life. Currently, I'm working on something entirely different, totally out of my genre. I'm working on a motivational book based off of The Drunken Savior. And I'm also working with a buddy of mine on a detective series.
Ooh.
A real true whodunit, no blood, no gore, totally away from what I write.
I didn't know about the new detective series. Barry, you keep secrets from me.
Hey, gotta have a little mystery here and there, right?
Absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about writing such frightening, gory, bloody. I'm going to keep throwing out those words because I know your audience loves to know that your stuff is scaring the pants off of people. That's why they're reading it. But how do you think this stuff up? How do you research it? What do you dream about at night? I'm a little terrified.
I don't dream, actually.
Really? You don't
I
dream?
really don't. I do not. I
Wow.
have a sleeping disorder called non-REM sleep disorder.
No.
Wow,
So
never
I
heard of
actually
that.
do not dream.
Really?
Ever?
Very, very seldom.
Wow.
And if I do dream, I never remember them anyway. So, I mean, I went through a sleep study one time, and they're the ones who discovered it. I actually went into REM sleep one time for 3 seconds.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
So this is interesting. You don't dream, yet you invoke nightmares in other people.
Well, I like scary stuff. I mean, some of my favorite books were written by Stephen King,
Yes.
and some of my not so favorite books were written by Stephen King.
Oh, there's that.
But I did love a lot of his earlier work before he got long-winded. But he's a great author out there, and I mean, very respected man. My hat goes off to anybody who's got as many books as he's got. I think it's like over 60
Wow.
or something like that.
Yeah.
Excellent author.
Yeah.
I take nothing away from him. I had 2 or 3 people who reviewed Time for a Serial Killer and put me in the same category with Stephen King and Tom Coons, something like that.
Dean Koontz.
Dean Koontz, that's it.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I thought a great honor for me, because just to be classified in that category, I was really, really amazed that somebody thought about my writing that well. But as far as coming up with the stuff that the blood and the gore, let me see.
How do you keep it fresh?
It's just,
Every torture is different.
well, it has to be. It can't be the same thing.
I know, but how do you fresh and think these things up over and over?
Well, I sit there and I think about it for a little bit, and when I'm writing, because I don't do storyboard. There's no organization to my writing whatsoever.
You are absolutely flying by the seat of your pants.
I'm a freestyler.
All right.
I freestyle write all the time, every time.
A total free writer. How about you, Debbie? Are you a free writer?
Yeah, I've tried to do outlines and do things, but I'm more comfortable really doing the pantster thing.
Wow.
Except for keeping track of the character. Because when you write a series, there's details you have to have from book to book.
Right.
And sometimes I have to go back to my books to remember. But I do keep an outline of the characters, because I introduce new characters in different, as I go on with the series, but some of the main characters are, uniform throughout the series. But I do pretty much keep, I just write, and then it turns into, like I said, sometimes I kill somebody I don't mean to kill, and or I make the killer somebody else. I have an idea of who I want to be the killer, and then I change it and I make it somebody. I make it look like that person, like throw in red herrings, and I make it look like that person, but then I make it somebody else. And that's like a twist, but it's even a twist to me.
I can't even imagine. I'm
You
so type A. I can't imagine. Lâle, are you a pantser?
need to read.
You know, I'm six
sorry,
of
go
one and
ahead.
half a dozen of another. I mean, I don't write the books the same way. I don't write stories. Like, I don't know where my stories come from exactly. Like, if, it's like maybe it comes from a metaphor or something, like somebody says something, or I have an interaction with somebody and I have a feeling about it and I come up with a metaphor, and then I'm like, oh, what if I made that real like that, but, so I guess the stories I kind of feel my way through. So I would guess that's more of a pantser kind of thing. The first novel that I wrote, which is actually Blue Woman Burning, that one I really had to feel my way through. So I wrote it sort of organically, and there was a lot of throwing stuff out and putting new stuff in and throwing. But then, like, my second and third novel, I had to outline them because by then I had a child and I had very little time to write. So the only way that I was going to be able to fit it in was if I got up very early in the morning and I knew exactly what I needed to do and just did it and then rushed off to work. So I kind of had to have an outline. Otherwise I couldn't have done it because I wouldn't have been able to keep track of what was happening. So.
Wow. I
Definitely tell you point blank that me staying on track, I might be 5-6 months from sitting down and writing it for one length of time, then take a break from it for 5 or 6 months, and then I'll hammer out 30 chapters in a week.
Yep.
But I do it.
So you
I'm
do like
sorry?
a rough draft and then you take a
No.
break and then come back and
No.
rewrite? No.
No, ma'am. When I say I take a break from it, I mean I stop.
Oh.
And it's
I've
not
done that
finished. It's
too.
far from finished. And then when I come back and start writing again, I'll read the very last paragraph that I wrote. That's the only thing I ever read
Oh,
about.
wow, I
That's
reread the whole
amazing.
And then I
thing.
start writing again. I might hammer out 30 chapters and be done with the book before I start going back over it again.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
So
always
you
good
She
to.
knows this for a fact.
You know what I love hearing about everyone being different. I just think it's so great for other people to hear that. Like, there's no one way. I mean,
That's
between
right.
the three of you, there's 20 books at least between the three of you, and yet totally different methods from each of you. And I would guess from book to book, each of you is a different method also. And you're here, you're successful. Obviously, you've already published books, you're doing it. How many people are, I think people are their own worst enemy. They stop, they think I can't do this because I'm not doing it right. You're saying this is proving there is no right way to do this.
Yeah.
There isn't.
It's whatever works for you is what the right way is.
It's
Yeah,
independent to each person. I mean, straight up. I mean, like when I told you how the ending to a Sniper's Kiss, when I told you what I was doing with that ending, you remember that?
You told me about that. Are you allowed to tell everybody else, or is it a secret?
No.
Okay.
That would be a spoiler. I ain't going there.
My lips are sealed.
And you asked me, how am I going to do that?
I did ask you how you were going to pull that off.
And what did you think? Did I pull it off all right?
Pulled it off all right. You know me, on a show, I will never discuss anything past the first 30 pages of a book because I don't want to accidentally give anything away. Nope.
I might give a hint to something, but I ain't gonna let it go.
But we'll just give it the thumbs up. You did it. I didn't know how you do it, but you did it. But I love that you're working.
Y'all can ask her off screen later on about it. She'll tell you. I guarantee you that.
But
it's
on other stuff, the inspirational piece and the traditional mystery without blood and gore, just to kind of stretch yourself. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've been wanting to do something with my buddy, and he's been trying ever since I got my first book published. He's been trying to write a book.
Good for you.
And he's not too great with the subtle details. elongation that a book needs from time to time. You know, the stuff, I call it filler material that don't really make a dad burn bit of difference to the book in the first place, but you need something in there to, you know, make it a little bit longer than what it is.
Exactly.
He's not really good about that. But one thing he is really good about is he's an ex-cop.
Oh, so he knows.
Ah,
He's got.
He's an ex-police officer, South Carolina State Patrol.
Oh, so
And
he's got plenty of stories for fodder, that's for sure.
And this is going to be straight fiction. There's not going to be any True Detective or anything like that. But the series is going to surround one particular detective. And it's going to be that way throughout every how many books we decide to write on it.
Very
And the first book is going to be called Murder on Garlington Road, which is right down the road from where I live.
Uh-oh.
very cool.
I'm curious about your method, like when you're collaborating, you know, how does that work?
I'll show you real quick. Stephanie's seen this a time or three. I'm also a truck driver. We're not allowed to be on the phone without a hands-free device. This is a hands-free Bluetooth. I get on the phone with him while I'm writing. I'll write something, I'll read it off to him and say, how's that sound? What do you think? Especially if it's technical and has a lot to do with the police aspect of it. He'll chime in and say, no, it needs to be something along these lines, or, you know, we need to word it a little differently, something along like that. So that's how we're going to, you know, that's how we basically collaborate on it. I do 90% of the writing, which I'm fine with that. And he'll tell you that I work my dirt and his. So.
Very cool. Yeah, collaborating is not easy. I'm always intrigued by how people manage to do that. You know, manage to actually write alongside someone else. So whether you are looking for serial killer series, we got one here, and more stuff to come, you definitely want to check out R.K. Mullins. And our third guest today, Lâle Davidson, is the author of the new novel, well, new to the world, but written quite a bit ago, Blue Woman Burning, and also Strange Appetites, a collection of short stories, which was the People's Choice Award at the Adirondack Center for Writing. So please welcome Lâle Davidson. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And yes, you are one of my favorite people too.
all our favorites.
Oh, absolutely. I told you this is a great show. I get all my favorites together. If only we were actually in the studio here, sitting on the couch sipping wine, that would make it.
Oh yeah, I forgot to bring my wine.
I know, and we have a studio here.
I got water. Okay.
Yeah, I did too. Water.
Studio with the wine, right? That's for sure.
Next time.
So tell us a little bit about Blue Woman Burning. I love the premise behind this. This is amazing.
Thank you. So, you know, Blue Woman Burning is about a young woman. She's probably 25, and her mother mysteriously vanishes right before her eyes in the Altiplano in Chile as they're driving home. And the rest of the book takes place as a young adult. She's just about to perch. She's been like trying all her life to kind of get ready to apply for medical school, and she can't quite get herself to do it because something's in her way. She's always been taking care of her brother. And so then something else happens. I won't tell you what, but it kind of launches on her across country on a journey. So it's a quest, the central question is sort of, who am I? Because her mother was a narcissist. And then, how can I tell what's real? Because this thing happened that is not, like nobody would believe this thing happened. So how do I know what real is if reality is acting in this very unreal way? So it's a road trip. It's a mystery. She's trying to figure herself out. She's trying to understand her family. She's trying to understand reality.
I love, you and I were speaking about genres, and you used one of my now favorite words, which is fabulism.
Yeah, I know, which you think is like, it's not that I'm so fabulous,
No, but I love the word. I love the word.
But yeah, so it used to be called magic realism, and that was, but a lot of people think of magic realism as a purely South American genre, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez coined the phrase. And I think it comes from a clash of cultures. Like they had the Indian culture and the Catholic culture, and those two realities come together. So you have this, it seems real, but then people, ascend to heaven, and nobody's surprised. Somebody gets shot, and the blood from the bullet goes down the street and turns left and up this, the porch step to its mother. The boy's, blood returns to his mother, sort of. So that's kind of a typical Gabriel Garcia Marquez kind of thing. But fabulism is a term that I've heard more recently in American literature. It seems to be becoming very popular, this blending, this kind of hybrid genre seems to be, and you can't really distinguish them at this point. But I think fabulism, has a relationship to fable. I would say that my short stories are more allegories, than they are like the novel has magical realist elements, but there's it's more realistic in that they're full-blown characters who are complicated. Whereas the short stories, I think the characters are complicated, but they're also allegories, there's a.
Tell us a little bit about the difference between writing short stories, like in Strange Appetites, and writing a novel. Sometimes I'll say to people, they'll say, oh, I should write short stories. It's easier. And my answer will be, well, not always,
Yeah.
Because you have fewer words to get out. Tell me a little bit about that for you.
Well, I think of somebody said once that short stories really have more in common with poetry than they do with novels. Like sometimes people think, well, a novel is just a really long short story. But it isn't really, because a short story you have to get in and get out so fast. And particularly like flash fiction, which is a genre that I really love, which is, these are stories that they're like less than 3 pages. Sometimes they're just like a paragraph. And I love those because they are like poetry, but they still have the fun of the plot, but they have to be, you have to weigh every single word. Like, do I need that word? Like, sort of what Keith was saying about there's all this filler stuff that doesn't really make a difference. Like, you can't have that in a short story. There's no time for that. Everything has to count,
I'm so glad that you equated them with poetry. I've never heard anyone say that before.
Yeah.
That short stories, most people, like you said, think it's like, oh, it's like a piece of a novel, like just one scene or one, but
Yeah.
went the other direction and said, no, it's kind of like poetry.
Yeah. Like you don't wrap it all up. You have like one moment to deal with, and you don't want to spell out sort of what happens,
I love that. And we're left kind of hanging like, and
Yeah.
I don't do short stories.
Yeah.
what was that, Keith?
So that's why I don't do short stories. Every time you've asked me to do one for one of your magazines, like for the House edition or something, I sat down and compacted and
I've asked many times for short stories from you, but I get that it's not for everyone. I just figured you were long-winded, and that's fine.
wait a minute, you told me Stephen King's.
But it's funny because I know people who write poetry and who are afraid of short story. And I'm so glad that you mentioned how, short story is like poetry. I think I'm going to mention that to one of those people. Debbie, you write both. You write short stories and you write poetry.
Yes, and books.
And
novels.
books. Do you feel when you're writing a short story that you're kind of, I don't know if your writing technique is one or the other. And Lâle, I don't know, do you write poetry also? I haven't had any of your poetry.
I do write poetry also. People used to tell me, you're not really a story writer, you're really a poet. And the way you can tell the difference is that poets think about the language a lot more and plot a lot less. Like plot was a little like confusing to me. Like you notice that, like Keith was saying, he's got his structure in his head. It's like there are three twists, and then there's an unpredictable. So he's got that structure that he knows, and that did not come naturally to me at all. So I was really fascinated by the words and the wordsmithing, and I could never figure out how to do plot. But I didn't want to be a poet because I didn't love reading poetry, and I thought you should really write what you love to read. And I've grown into loving poetry. As I've gotten older, it's really grown on me. I think I was intimidated by it. And now I realize that, an awful lot of people don't know what, they'll read a poem and they'll go, and then you ask them what it means, and they're like, I have no idea. But
Like
very
an
good.
abstract painting, right?
Yeah. God,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because you're right. There are poems you read and you say,
Yes.
I've heard all my
There's a
life about
visual
writing.
element to poetry. There's a
Yeah.
visual element. And it's when you write books or short stories or whatever, you also want to have that feeling that it's for people to be able to visualize what you're writing.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I focus a lot on character, especially because of cozy mysteries. Characters are very important. So I
Mhm.
focus on that. And that's different from poetry. You don't focus so much
Right.
on character. So
Right.
with the books, I focus on character, and even with the short stories, well, with short stories you have less characters. You don't go into depth with the characters.
Mhm.
You don't.
Yeah.
Really, and the setting is important too with a short story, I think, as a book, and poetry, the setting.
And I think that the other thing that makes the poetry different is that, you have the line breaking. So it's this whole other expressive palette. Will I break my line here? Will I start with this word or that word? And so you're using the space on the page as part of your expressive tool, which prose you don't do. It just goes across the page.
Right. That's true.
Something I've heard all my life that I just always disagreed with. And Lâle, is that right?
yes.
That's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
I was always told, write what you know.
Mhm.
I don't know how. I mean, I ain't never killed nobody.
You don't have to write what you know. You can
Write
research
what
it.
you like to read.
Right,
Is a
that's
better
true.
way to put it.
That I agree
think-
with.
And
Yeah.
Lâle put it great. I just wanted to point that out. It ain't necessarily what you know or what you think you know about writing. It's what you like to read about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's true.
The
And
bloodier, the
Keith-
better. So that's where all that came from.
And
My
Keith, you
dad
said,
was
you said something interesting too about you wrote in order to understand, which is something I tell
Mhm.
my writing students. I'm like, don't write what you know, write what you want to know, like write to discover. And that's what it seems to me you're doing with your serial killer mind.
And that's where research comes into it, and speaking to people
Yeah.
in the field. That's how that, people enjoy that. They want to learn new things. Even in fiction, you have to research. So people
Absolutely. And
wanna-
you're right. Keith said that about serial killers. You wanted to know why they thought the way they did.
the
So
psychology, right?
So by writing them,
And I didn't want a definition from a psychologist either. I wanted it from a layman's term,
exactly.
Mhm.
The only way to do that is to figure out how they think, because there's no books out there like that.
I have a theory about serial killers, so it's going to just ruin it for you completely. I don't think there's any mystery. I just think they're brain damaged. I think they're missing this. There's a part in your brain right up here where all our relational parts, our ethics is in this part of the brain. And I figure, do you hear that story about the guy, the railroad worker? He was like, it was this a long time ago, and he hit this peg, and this rod shot up and went right through his brain, and he lived. But he was a sociopath afterwards because it took out that part of his brain.
What about Dexter? Have you watched that, Keith? What do you think of Dexter?
Actually, I've watched a couple of Dexter's shows, and I'm really not a fan.
How come?
I'm not. Well, too, how to put this? I mean, what's the right words I'm looking for? Too flashy.
Okay.
Most serial killers don't, from what I've been able to find out, most of them don't plan as much as they show in Dexter's show.
They don't what?
They don't plan nearly as much.
Oh, okay.
A lot of it is off spur of the moment. It ain't got nothing to do with planning. I mean, almost every single serial killer out there, the victims that fall victim to them were a victim of opportunity to them.
Mm.
They do most have a predefined victim type, and a reason for that in their psychology.
Yeah.
But Lâle, I like to say, I put it this way: everybody has a dark side to them, and this is absolutely 100% true. I guarantee it. You think about it for a second, whether they let that dark side out, and like I do in my writing, or they let it out in like a real serial killer does, or they suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a single soul on this planet that has not had a dark thought. No one can say that they have not had a dark thought. We're human.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible not to have that.
But it is interesting to think about what different parts of the brain, we're all artists here. And what, even I was reading a story recently about a man who was married. He was a loving husband and father and everything. And then all of a sudden he became a terrible, abusive person. And his wife left him, and his life was in shambles. And he even started committing crimes. And he ended up in jail, and they did like a medical test on him. He had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
And they removed the brain tumor, and he was suddenly back to being this lovely, loving, he remarried his wife. He's back with his family. So Lâle, it's really interesting to think, we think we're kind of in charge, shall we say? But there's so much we're not in charge of.
Yeah.
There's so many things that can affect our psyche, be it physical or emotional.
Yeah.
That can make someone turn and do things they normally wouldn't do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so
the list is unfathomable.
There are so many variables out there.
Yeah, in my novel Blue Woman Burning, it's partly autobiographical, because it's dealing with people who, with narcissism and somebody with bipolar disorder, and and of course the main character, has her dark side. She has some death wishes for some of these people, and that she's dealing with. And but what I was going to say is, one of the things that she's dealing with a lot that I think is a personal question that I always have is, how much does a mentally ill person, how much control do they have over their mental illness? Maybe they're being cruel because they really can't stop it. Or they're too, it's hard for me to give up on a person. Like, I always feel like, no, there's always a chance, like you could change, there's always a chance that you could change. But sometimes I wonder. So,
But that is a big philosophical question too, about ownership of that dark side, shall we say, whether or not there's mental illness, or just, I don't know if there's ever just darkness, or if it's always attached to some sort of an illness. But accountability, what are we accountable for, and what is beyond our control, and what should be done about those things? That's a whole societal philosophical question about that.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of think, like, just because you're a sociopath doesn't mean you're going to be a serial killer. Like, there's plenty of sociopaths who are not serial killers.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I read about a serial killer once, and an interview that he had done. I can't remember what his name was right offhand, but they asked him point blank, "Why did you kill?" And his answer to it was, "It's just another animal."
Ooh.
Ah.
Well, Debbie thinks that's even worse than killing a human.
Oh, yes.
Well, I mean, people go out hunting all the time, right? They hunt deer, they hunt turkey, whatever. They hunt to feed themselves, they hunt for trophies. There's all kinds of different reasons for it. If you take a look at the instinctive nature of the human animal, the male of the species is extremely aggressive. We are always and always will be hunters first and foremost, because we've always had to, go hunt our food and provide for those members of the community that could not hunt.
Mhm.
So, I can understand. I don't agree, but I can understand that particular guy's outlook. To
Mhm.
him, whether it was a dog, cat, goat, whatever, or a person, to them it was just another animal. It meant nothing.
Crazy.
So I can understand how I can understand how he thinks like that.
Right.
I don't agree with it, but
Yeah.
I can understand it.
Yeah, and that gets back to the accountability about people who are mentally ill and how, Lâle, how you're dealing with it in the book.
Mhm.
What
It makes you almost sad for them, because it's like, wow, if that's what you think about humans, you are missing an awful lot in life.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm not going to disagree with you because I have to agree with you on that. But apparently he did.
Yeah.
Well,
He
so-
didn't really think too much about it. I think that's the higher end of the sociopath. Those are the extremes.
right.
Mhm.
And
There's
like
people
Lâle,
like that.
they're not all serial killers. They're not all thinking that, many are just, apathetic toward, relational.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
There's a very big
exactly.
gap between someone who has apathy towards human relationships and somebody who is a serial killer. And it's not the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like in Time for a Serial Killer, I write about a fictional serial killer called, oh hell, I can't even remember his name right now. But anyway, he was pushed to it because of an emotional breakdown. He was left standing at an altar. So the women that he hunted and killed reminded him of that woman, and who was actually his first victim. And I find that there's a lot of cases of the serial killers that are out there and are in jail that there's been one defining moment
Mm,
that made them go that way.
right.
Some of them, unfortunately, and I really hate to say this because these are the really disturbed ones. Those are the ones that start killing when they're children,
Mm,
Yeah.
and they'll kill an animal.
Yeah, sometimes they start with animals. Uh-huh.
Mm.
And then later on through life, they progress on down the line. Those are the sociopaths and the psychopaths that often are missed.
Mhm.
scary stuff. We've gone from
I know, it's awful.
mysteries and
You
poems
gotta get
about
rid of
cats.
serial killers.
Well,
Yeah. I guess, I forget who the name of the director was, but he directed a play about somebody in Poland who had helped all these Jewish people escape, these children. He was a doctor. I forget his name, but anyway, the director said, it's much easier to make a movie about bad people. It's much harder to make a movie about good people. That, like we tend to be sort of fascinated by the evil, like what makes this serial killer tick. But the real mystery is, how do we become good people? And how do we stay good people? That's a mystery.
that is a mystery. So let's write about
The
that.
biggest mystery of all, how can we help those that are mentally ill to
Yeah.
become what we consider to be more, and
That's a big
help
mystery.
them be more productive people in society?
Yeah.
That's the biggest question of all.
Yeah. That is one. Yeah.
Well, I think our readers get to run the gamut this week. If you're looking for cats, dogs, romance, poems, and cozy mysteries, you'll definitely want to visit debbiedlouise.com. There are a dozen books there. And I know for a fact that there's always a deal on something going on with a promotion. So make sure you get in on that mailing list so you're involved. So we'll go from the ridiculous to the sublime here with the light to heavy. If serial killers are more your speed, R.K. Mullins has a book for you. But just to show us that he's not just a one-sided author, he is working on some other genres and thoughts right now. So you'll definitely want to connect with him on social media and everything else so you can follow his rising star and see what comes next. And then finally, Lâle Davidson is fabulous fabulism as far as I'm concerned. Magical realism, that's just such a wonderful title, and it's so true. It's magic happening right here in front of our very eyes. And there's so much magic that happens right here in the world just because, we're human, and that's, really uncovering the magic that is within us and around us. So Blue Warming Burning is her new novel. And if you like your fabulism in little bites instead, Strange Appetites Stories are a collection of short stories. So please grab a copy of that. And to three of my favorite authors, I will say thank you for joining me, and we need to do this again. Next time on the couch with wine.
Thank you.
Yes.
And congratulations on all of your new books. So proud of everything. And you'll keep us posted on everything else that's new so we can share it with all of your viewers.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to meet Keith and Debbie. It was,
Yes, likewise, Lâle.
Thank you. And for
I thought
everyone,
I thought it was a pretty magical hour, really.
absolutely, absolutely. And I hope that we've inspired not only readers, but writers. So get out there and start writing, everybody. Fantastic.
Please.
Thank you.
Ladies, I'm honored to be on the show with y'all.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit BetweenTheCoversTV.com. By the way, at BetweenTheCoversTV.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.